about plants. If you followed me for a while, you know I have a bit of a thing for these guys, and I feel like they make my space feel incredibly calm, they make it feel tranquil, and they make it a nice environment to work in, because obviously I work from home as well as spending downtime at home. When it comes to plants, it's not as easy as set and forget, and now I'm no expert, but I've definitely managed to keep a fair few alive. So what I'm going to do in this video is I'm going to share a whole bunch of tips with you from beginning, like choosing the plant that's right for your space, all the way up to the end, which in my opinion is like propagation. So I have divided this video into different sections for you, and we're going to be covering a whole range of topics. If you want to see more bits and pieces and behind the scenes and more plant stuff, jump on over to my Instagram and check out my Instagram stories. My Instagram is @RachelObst. Alright, so let's get started. The first thing that I want to talk to you guys about is the space that you're putting your plants in. Natural light is pretty essential to indoor plants. Some can do pretty well in dim surroundings, but most of them do need a fairly consistent source of indirect light, especially in order to be able to flourish and grow well. Make sure you're checking your plant's care label just so you know exactly what it's after, or you can look it up online as well and see if there's any special needs that it has. Things like succulents and cacti do need continuous light, and plants with a decent amount of foliage need roughly, 6 to 8 hours of sunlight per day. And remember, don't choose a space for the plant, choose a plant that suits the space. Here are some things you might want to consider. Now, I try to get by with as little as possible, but the more plants I had, the more I have needed, unfortunately. So to keep my soils out of the weather, I do have these little containers with scoops in them, just to make sure that they're not getting moldy or gross. I have some shears, but your scissors will do fine. Some twine for tying things onto bamboo or moss growing poles. Now, I've gotten away with it for ages. You don't need one, but a plant mister is great, and I've started using it since my plants have been getting a bit bigger. You may also want a watering can. Not a necessity. I have had plants for years and years, and I only invested into one of these this year. It is a water meter, but this one also measures pH of the soil and the light. And all you do, so I found it on eBay, it was like $15. Place that in the soil, and as you can see, this plant does not need watering. Okay, so you can get some ideas. I'm just going to run around the house. I'm going to show you a few easy care options, and then I'm also going to show you some of my personal favorites. The first one is probably familiar if you've, dabbled in plants a little bit, and it's a devil's ivy. I've had this one for 2 years, and it was living in a really shallow, drainless pot. Actually, it was living in a clear, it was like a fish bowl, and a friend gifted it to me years ago. So I've had that for a while, and I realized that it stopped growing, so I replanted it into this pot, and it's trailing down again. These guys are really easy to care for, and they come in lots of different variegations as well. So I've got another one over here, and yeah, there's heaps of different kinds, and they're relatively inexpensive too, like even for the variegated ones. In the same league is heartleaf philodendron. I have a couple of these guys, so you might see a few different ones throughout the video, but they're really easy to care for, and they'll pretty much tell you when they need to be watered anyway. You'll see the leaves just start to droop. Very fast growing, and I think they're really pretty. Swiss cheese, you may be used to seeing my other big Swiss cheese in my kitchen, which is growing up a tomato trellis. This guy is actually a cutting from that plant, and they grow really fast, and I just find them very interesting to look at as well. It's super fun watching the leaves unfold too. Then of course we've got Monstera. These are probably one of my favorites. I find them so impressive, just with the really large leaves. They grow up these poles. I do have a variegated version as well, which you don't even want to know how hard this thing was to find. It was obnoxiously difficult. So it's really small, it's only just starting to get the leaf shape. They love climbing, so if you give them somewhere to climb, they're just gonna go straight up. Then we have a ZZ plant. This thing will practically grow in a cupboard, and if you're you know, killing one of these, you're doing something wrong. These things just be neglected and thrive. Okay, now let's talk favorites, because you know you're not meant to have favorites, but there's always some that are just very interesting to look at. So up there is Oxalis triangularis. This is, I don't know, I just love it. It shuts, the leaves actually shut at nighttime. They just sort of close down, and then in the morning they open up again. It is a bulb plant, and these aren't flowers. Like, it will flower as well. It gets these little purple flowers. These are the leaves. They do go dormant every few years as well, so you know, if it just shuts down and needs a rest for a while, don't think it's dead. Like, they do go dormant. Excuse my lighting cable, but I need that for filming something, so I'm not, maybe I should whatever. You guys get the point. Anyway, this is a fiddly philodendron whose scientific name I'm not even going to attempt to pronounce because I will absolutely butcher it. I love them. Got all these new shoots all over it, which is just very exciting. New leaves and things, and this thing is just takes off. Again, it's one of those plants where if you mount it to something, it's just going to climb right up there, which I think looks great. And I've just got it next to a little fiddle. Now we have Pillias. My mum actually gave me this one for my birthday, and this one's growing really quickly too. It seems to love this terracotta pot. I have a few other ones still in like plastic nursery pots. This one is growing a lot more rapidly, and I find they're just very whimsical and very fun to look at. Now I've got my Rhaphidophora tetrasperma. I have another one over there, but I do like this one. It's much lighter green than my other one. It doesn't live on the table, but I'm going to be repotting it. It's growing too fast, and I want to get a proper moss pole in there for it to climb up. I just want to see how tall it can get. So yeah, I'll show you how to repot that later on in the video. One option that you can use is shopping online, but this can be a bit of a gamble sometimes, as you can never really guarantee how well things will turn up to your place. There's always other options if you don't want to shop online. You can head down to a plant shop like this one where you know they've looked after the plants well, but I will show you a couple of things that you'll want to look out for. Okay, so I am in a store called Pop Wilder, which is in St Kilda, and I have used them myself for plant needs. They're brilliant. So one of the things that you're going to want to look at in your plants is the foliage. Is it actually healthy? So we want to make sure that there's no signs of bugs. So if you're at a plant shop like this, you know that they're probably pretty well looked after and they come from good growers. So you're looking at a fairly stable plant and something that will transplant well into your home. But one of the things that you want to look out for is that your plant doesn't have too many brown spots on the leaves, and also that it doesn't have mold or any other signs of infection. Check for a good root system. This is incredibly important when it comes to choosing your plant. And it may not be a good idea to pull the plant out of the pot and have a look, because someone might get mad at you, but just see if you can see the roots from the bottom of the pot. Also, just take a quick second to make sure that there's no insects or powdery mildew or mold on your plants. You might like to keep a tag, or like I do, I have a little album in my phone so I can either keep photos of the tags or screenshots of the plant, just so I know what it is, just in case I forget the name and I need to figure something out about it. I can always Google it later on. Side note, the plants that come in nursery pots may be comfortable in there, and you might not want to actually repot them yet, because already transitioning the plant from where it was to your place is a bit of a shock for it. So sometimes, you know, if we get home and we repot it straight away, it can't deal with that. And I remember this was a mistake that I used to make as well. I used to go and pick plants up and then bring them home and repot them straight away and wonder why they weren't doing too well. If it comes in a pot, leave it in the pot until you need to repot it. For the meantime, like if you don't want this on display, simply get a pot to use as a cover. Pots can come in a variety of different materials, and it is important to note that the material your pot was made from may affect the watering needs of your plant. So for example, Pillias love properly drained soil, so therefore they thrive in terracotta pots. I also love having clay and ceramic pots. It's no problem keeping them in the nursery pots until they're ready to be upgraded. Okay, so like I said earlier in the video, I am going to be repotting this plant. Just personally, I do like to let them dry out a little bit before I repot, rather than dealing with all the wet soil, because then I'm going to give it a thorough water through once I've repotted it. The reason that I'm going to repot it is because, like I said, it's growing really, really quickly and I want to give it something more solid to grow up rather than a bamboo little stake thing. So I'll be giving it a proper moss pole. So when it comes to repotting, you want to choose a pot that's like, if you can see this, if I hold it up to the same level, it's about an inch bigger on all sides of the pot. That's going to give it a lot more room to grow. You don't want to go too big. I feel like this is almost too big. But yeah, if I was to go any bigger, what can happen is that the plant might not use all of the water. Water can become logged in the soil, and I will talk about soil in just a minute, and it can lead to overwatering and it can lead to root rot. So you want to make sure that the pot is appropriately sized so the plant can use the water that you give it. When we're repotting, we want to make sure that we are loosening the roots within the soil. That way we're encouraging them to spread out a little further when we do pot them into the new soil. A blend is definitely the secret to life. Well, I think so anyways. A few things that I like to have on hand is your standard organic potting mix. I like to have charcoal, perlite, peat moss, orchid bark, and cacti soil. The reason for this is I find those ones to be the most versatile, and I sort of eyeball out a mix when I'm setting up a new plant. Just using potting mix alone can result in some compaction, so sometimes it would be hard for a plant's roots to grow, and sometimes the water doesn't drain out as well as it needs to. Also, just take note, see this moss pole here? I'm putting that because this raff has aerial roots, so it will grow up the pole. I like to keep the poles wet, so whenever I water the plant, I will water the moss pole, or if I go around in the morning, if I'm doing some misting, I will mist the moss pole. The reason for this is that aerial roots are attracted to humidity, so it's going to be more attracted to grow up that if we can keep the humidity there. Many potting mixes do contain a slow release fertilizer in them, but it is still necessary to feed your plants to make sure they're getting the nutrients that they need. So because I'm just at Pop Wilder still, Mish very kindly put on display the ones that they use here. So this brand's called Monash Organics, they're Australian made. This is a foliage spray which you use roughly every 2 weeks, and this as a soil food which you would use every 2 months or so. At home I have this stinky fish mix which I use, and I dilute it in my watering can, so just put a tiny bit in, like half a capful, and then fill the rest with water. Or I have a compost bin. So with the compost bin, I'm not going to show you in there because it's obviously food waste, but yeah, so the food waste goes in and you put like the compost stuff with it. There's a little grate at the bottom and then it creates a liquid, and as you can see there's a little itty bitty tap down the bottom. I don't have any ready at the moment because I did use it previously, but with that tap I can empty it and it creates a liquid, and again dilute that into water, and then I can use that to fertilize my plants if I want to. So obviously I don't have this ready all the time, so that's why I have the fish mix as well. Hello, duck. If I wasn't renting, I'm sure I could be a lot more creative with how my plants are set up and probably end up drilling some shelves into the wall or something, but this is what we've got for now, so have a look around. Okay, so when it comes to the care and the maintenance of these guys, it depends how seriously you want to take it, because there are quite a few things that you can do, like we're talking about humidifier, heat mats, pebble trays, all of that sort of thing. And I feel like, you know, personally, I don't want to buy heaps and heaps and heaps of stuff. One little thing that I did want you to note is that with a lot of your plants, you'll see they start growing in one direction. So every now and again, you just want to make sure you're turning them around so they can get even sunlight. So even with ones like this, I'm just gonna rotate, and as you can see, like, I've still got a lot of my plants in their nursery pots. I water my plants once every week, roughly, depending on how they need. Like, I'll go around twice a week and check, but usually it's like once a week that they need a water. When it comes to plants, there are no hard and fast rules. Like, the things that you read are just suggestions, and feel free to treat them that way. Like I said, I had that devil's ivy living in a glass fishbowl with no drainage for 2 years, and it was fine. When I do my watering, I like to also go around and just check on the leaves of the plants, and that's when I'll also do a wipe down of the big leaves. I feel like the little ones like this, they don't really tend to catch too much dust, so they're normally all right as they are. But yeah, these big guys definitely need a wipe down. And even like this big pillar, like, I'll give it a wipe down, because think of it like a solar panel. Like, if a solar panel is dusty and dirty, it's not going to absorb the amount of light that it has the potential to. I like to water early in the morning. The reason for this being, it gives the plant the whole day to have light on it to help evaporate and absorb the water. Now, if you don't have a moisture meter, there are a few ways you can check if your plant needs watering. One, look at how wilted that is. Like, you can see it desperately needs a drink, because the leaves should be sitting up like this. And I feel like you can tell when a plant's happy because it looks like it needs to ask you a question. I'll give you some examples. Like, they just look like they're trying to say something. Hello. Another thing you can do if you don't have a moisture meter is you can simply put your finger into the soil. See how the top of this looks dry, but if I place my finger in this soil, like, I can feel that it's actually got moisture in it still. So I'm not going to water this one yet. These guys do like to be dried out thoroughly. Most plants will come with a little name tag that tends to have care instructions with it as well. Well, obviously, when it is warmer, the plant can use more water, so it may need more frequent watering. And when it comes to winter, you might want to step it back a notch. Similar thing goes with fertilizer. I have some plants that I wouldn't fertilize at all in the winter, but in summer they go nuts. Something to note as well is whether you have central heating or air conditioning units or things like that. If a plant is directly in a line of an aircon, might not be too happy. If they're reasonably far enough away, they'll probably be okay. But you just got to be mindful of the temperatures that they're in. And as well, in winter, if you're using a heating system, that can dry out the air a lot and therefore dry out the soil of the plant too. Sorry if I sound a bit echoey, but I'm in the bathroom. These are some of the ones that like top-down watering. I have noticed while I do water a lot in the bathtub, the reason that I do this is so it can drain out completely. So I either do the bathtub or a sink. I just fill the sink with some water, set these in and make sure they're sitting in properly. And what the soil will do is absorb some of the moisture. If you have any extra tips, feel free to leave them in the comment section, because I am always open to learning new things. Now, I want to talk to you about leaves. Okay, so I already talked to you about wilting. Another thing that you might see is puckering. Actually, I have a better example than that. This guy needs a bit of a clean, which I'll do next time I water it, but this is an Indian rope. So it is a type of Hoya. This is also a Hoya. This is also a Hoya. They hold water for a long period of time, and something that I've noticed, so they have quite hard leaves. When they need a water, this guy will start to get little wrinkles and the leaves will become soft. Now, when I got this guy posted to me, he had brown along the edges, because this is all just a bit of troubleshooting. So if it's crispy, apparently that means it's not getting enough moisture or water. If they were like squishy or like really dark and they just look, easiest way to explain is that they look rotted. I don't have any examples to show you, but that could typically be a sign of overwatering. It could either go yellow or it could go brown and still be like kind of squishy to the touch and just not look healthy, and that's something that you don't want. I think another important thing to remember when it comes to plant care is that Plants live in a circular cycle, like dying pieces of a plant are part of its life cycle. A leaf is not going to live forever. If the whole plant looks like it's in trouble, then yeah, like jump in there and fix what's wrong. But if one leaf is dying, that's okay. Check for new growth. If there's new signs of growth, then you're probably heading in the right direction anyway. You want the plant to put its energy into new growth and into getting bigger. You might also want to consider what type of water that you're using. My guys are totally fine with tap water. That's going to depend on where you live as well. Tap water obviously does have extra things put in it, like fluoride and chlorine and all of those sorts of things. So see how your plants go with it. I mean, I've read other people using things like distilled water, catching rainwater and using that for your plants. So, you know, do what feels comfortable for you and what works for your plants. Now I want to tell you guys about some common pests. I've only experienced one, which was fungus gnats, and I got rid of those with some sticky yellow sheets and also using some Venus flytraps. So these look like tiny little black flies, and they hover over the soil and they lay their eggs in the soil of the plants. They don't really cause any major damage, but you don't want them around, they're just gross. The next one, I'm not going to draw the actual bug itself, I'm going to show you how to spot it. These are mealy bugs. They're tiny and they're white and they're fuzzy, and they feed underneath the leaves, and you'll see these like cottony white areas start to appear on your plant. Before you go nuts on the heavy chemicals, make sure you're trying washing your plants down first. Another common one is spider mites, and these may look like tiny specks on the back of the leaf or very fine webbing on the undersides of leaves and around the stems and things like that. There are lots of other different types of pests as well, but I thought I would just share with you 3 very common ones. When you are doing the rounds and watering your plants, make sure you check the leaves. You want to look out for signs of these things, because if one plant has it, it can very easily spread it onto other things. So if you do spot something, you're going to want to move it out into quarantine, treat the issue. But if you did have lots of other plants close to it, you're probably going to want to treat them as well, just for the sake of prevention. So just making sure that you're checking those leaves, because you don't want that sort of situation to get out of control and infect all of your plants. Propagation is so fun, but make sure you look up what your plant needs, because they do prefer different things. So there is of course the water method, where you will allow a cutting or a slip to grow roots in water. You can also use lightweight expanded plate aggregate, which is like semi-hydroponics. You can use sphagnum moss and allow it to grow roots in there. Make sure that it's growing proper roots, like 1 inch or 2 long, before you're potting it into soil. You can see here this pilia, it propagates differently. It grows little pops on the side. And then we have nodes. So some plants like this one, you can see there's this little aerial root sticking off. And what we want to do is we want to cut the plant above that node, because that's where the root is going to grow out of. You'll see a lot of really common indoor plants have this, and they are so easy to propagate. So what you would do is cut above that node, place it in water, allow it to grow roots, and then plant it up. These are things that I've learned either through trial and error, through reading, or advice that I've been given from other plant lovers. I hope you're feeling a little bit more confident now in keeping your green friends alive. Some of it is going to come down to doing a little bit of research, or maybe a bit of a trial and error if you see a problem and you need to try and figure out what it is. Once you overcome that general anxiety of trying not to kill something, it's actually really enjoyable, and I feel like, you know, having that little bit of gardening time, like indoor gardening time, is such a great way for me to relax during the week. It's just like, you know, a couple of blocks of time where I can't be on my phone and I can't be doing other things, and I have to be solely focused on the task. Anyway, I hope you're doing really well, and I will catch you guys in my next upload. Bye!